I thought my crush Jake was finally starting to notice me after months of subtle flirting, until I discovered what he was really hiding behind those mysterious late-night texts, secret phone calls, and the way he'd suddenly disappear whenever I got too close. What I found out completely shattered everything I believed about love, trust, and the person I thought I knew. The truth was so shocking that it didn't just change how I saw Jake, it changed how I saw myself. If you want to know what can happen when someone you're falling for has a secret that could destroy everything, make sure to like this video and subscribe because this story will blow your mind. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, you won't want to miss what happens next. Let me take you back to where it all started. I'm Emma, I'm 23, and I work at this trendy marketing agency downtown. Jake joined our team about 6 months ago as the new graphic designer, and from the moment he walked into that office, I was completely mesmerized. He had this effortless confidence, these piercing green eyes, and this smile that could literally light up the entire room. For the first few weeks, our interactions were purely professional. He'd ask about project deadlines, I'd explain client requirements, and that was it. But then something shifted. He started lingering by my desk a little longer than necessary, bringing me coffee without me asking, and making these inside jokes that only we understood. My heart would race every time he'd lean over my shoulder to look at my computer screen, and I could smell his cologne, this intoxicating mix of cedar and something uniquely him. Everyone in the office started noticing too. My best friend and coworker Sarah would constantly tease me about it. "Emma, he's totally into you," she'd whisper during lunch breaks. "The way he looks at you when you're not watching? Girl, that man is smitten." And honestly, I was starting to believe it. The signs were all there, the playful texts after work hours, the way he'd find excuses to work late when he knew I was staying behind, and how he'd always volunteer to be my partner for any team projects. But then, about 3 weeks ago, everything changed. It was subtle at first, so subtle that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Jake started becoming distant. Not in an obvious way, but in these small, almost imperceptible ways that made my stomach churn with anxiety. He'd still smile and joke around, but there was something different in his eyes. Something guarded. Something secretive. The first red flag was his phone. Jake used to be so casual about it, leaving it face up on his desk, answering calls in front of everyone, even showing me funny memes during our coffee breaks. But suddenly, he was treating that phone like it contained state secrets. He'd flip it face down the moment anyone approached, step outside to take calls, and I swear I caught him typing messages under his desk during meetings. When I jokingly asked him about it, he just laughed it off and said he was dealing with family drama. But his laugh felt forced, and his eyes didn't meet mine. Then there were the mysterious absences. Jake had always been reliable, always at his desk, always available to grab lunch or help with projects. But now, he'd disappear for hours at a time with vague excuses about running errands or meeting a friend. Sarah and I even joked that maybe he had a secret second job, but deep down, something felt wrong. Really wrong. The breaking point came last Friday afternoon. I was working late, and I thought I was alone in the office when I heard hushed voices coming from the conference room. I recognized Jake's voice immediately, but he sounded different. Tense. Almost panicked. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent chills down my spine. What was Jake hiding, and why did I have this terrible feeling that whatever it was would change everything between us forever? The weekend after that mysterious conference room conversation was pure torture. I couldn't stop replaying Jake's voice in my head, that tense, almost frightened tone that I'd never heard from him before. I found myself obsessing over every interaction we'd had, searching for clues I might have missed. Had he been trying to tell me something? Was he in some kind of trouble? Monday morning, I arrived at the office early, hoping to catch Jake and maybe casually ask if everything was okay. But when I got to his desk, he wasn't there. In fact, he didn't show up until almost 11 a.m., and when he did, he looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, rumpled clothes like he'd slept in them, and that same guarded expression that had become his default over the past few weeks. "Rough weekend?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light and casual. Jake startled slightly, as if I'd caught him off guard. "Oh, hey Emma. Yeah, just family stuff, you know how it is." But as he said it, he was already turning away, busying himself with his computer like he couldn't wait to end the conversation. That's when Sarah became my unofficial detective partner. She'd noticed the change in Jake too, and unlike me, she wasn't blinded by romantic feelings. "Something's definitely up with him," she whispered during our lunch break. "And it's not family drama. My cousin acts exactly like this when he's hiding something big from his girlfriend." "What do you think it could be?" I asked, even though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Sarah's expression grew serious. "Emma, I hate to say this, but what if he's seeing someone? Like, someone serious enough that he can't talk about it at work?" The thought hit me like a physical blow. Of course. It made perfect sense. The secretive phone calls, the mysterious absences, the way he'd been pulling away from our connection. Jake had found someone, and here I was, pathetically pining after a man who was probably planning romantic getaways with another woman. But even as I tried to accept this explanation, something didn't quite fit. If Jake was in a relationship, why would he look so stressed? So frightened? Happy couples don't usually inspire that kind of anxiety. Unless. What if it's complicated? I found myself saying out loud. Complicated how? I don't know. What if she's married? What if it's someone from work and they're trying to keep it secret? What if I stopped myself before I could spiral further into speculation? But Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. "Oh my God, Emma. What if it's someone we know? Someone in the office?" The rest of that week became an exercise in subtle surveillance. Sarah and I started paying attention to every woman Jake interacted with, looking for signs, for glances that lasted too long, for any hint of intimacy. We analyzed his lunch breaks, noted when he left early, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I even started timing his bathroom breaks to see if they coincided with anyone else's absences. The breakthrough came Thursday afternoon. Jake's phone buzzed while he was in the bathroom, and without thinking, I glanced over at his desk. The screen was lit up with a text notification, and even from several feet away, I could see the sender's name, M. Don't reply yet. M. Who was M? But what I discovered about M would turn out to be just the beginning of a truth so shocking that I would question everything I thought I knew about the man I was falling in love with. The mysterious M became my obsession. I spent that entire Thursday night lying awake, running through every woman in our office, our building, even our client list, trying to figure out who M could be. Michelle from accounting? Maria from HR? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that I was dealing with some kind of forbidden office romance. But Friday brought a discovery that made me realize I'd been thinking about this all wrong. I was grabbing coffee from the kitchen when I overheard Jake on a phone call in the hallway. He thought he was alone, speaking in that same hushed, tense voice I'd heard the week before. But this time, I was close enough to catch fragments of the conversation. "Can't keep doing this," Jake was saying. "People are starting to notice." And then, the words that made my blood run cold, "If she finds out, everything is ruined." She. Jake was talking about a she. Was he talking about me? Did Jake know I was suspicious? Or was there another woman involved, someone who couldn't find out about M? I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding, trying to catch more of the conversation. "Meeting tomorrow night," Jake continued. "Usual place, just be careful, okay? We can't afford any mistakes now." When Jake hung up and walked past the kitchen, I pretended to be deeply focused on adding sugar to my coffee. But inside, I was falling apart. Everything about this conversation screamed affair: the secrecy, the fear of being discovered, the clandestine meetings. Jake wasn't just seeing someone, he was involved in something that required this level of deception and anxiety. That weekend, I hit rock bottom. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the image of Jake with another woman. Sarah tried to comfort me, suggesting that maybe I was misinterpreting everything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my instincts were right. Sunday night, desperation got the better of me. I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to Jake's apartment complex. I told myself I was just going to see if he was home, maybe finally work up the courage to have an honest conversation about what was happening between us. But deep down, I think I was hoping to catch him with her. To finally see the truth with my own eyes. Jake's car wasn't in his assigned parking spot. It was 9 p.m. on a Sunday night. Where could he be? Then I remembered his phone conversation: meeting tomorrow night, usual place. What if tomorrow night had actually been Sunday night? What if right now, at this very moment, Jake was with M, sharing the kind of intimacy I'd been dreaming about for months? I sat in my car for almost 2 hours, feeling pathetic and desperate, but unable to leave. Finally, at 11:15 p.m., Jake's car pulled into the parking lot. But he wasn't alone. The passenger door opened, and out stepped someone I recognized. Someone whose identity made absolutely no sense given everything I thought I knew about the situation. It wasn't a woman at all. Who was this person, and why had Jake been so terrified of anyone finding out about their connection? The person getting out of Jake's car was Marcus Chen, the CEO of our biggest client company. But this wasn't a late-night business meeting. Marcus was dressed casually in jeans and a hoodie, and there was something about their body language, the way they moved together, that spoke of intimacy and familiarity. I watched, frozen in disbelief, as Jake and Marcus stood by the car talking in hushed tones. Marcus reached out and briefly touched Jake's arm, not a handshake, not a professional gesture, but something tender and reassuring. Then Marcus got into his own car, which had apparently been parked elsewhere, and drove away. My mind was reeling. Marcus Chen was married, very publicly married to a prominent socialite. Their wedding had been featured in magazines. Marcus was also known to be extremely conservative, a major donor to traditional family values organizations. If what I was witnessing was what I thought it was, the implications were staggering. But it still didn't make complete sense. Why all the secrecy at the office? Why the stressed phone calls? Why did Jake look like he was carrying the weight of the world? I spent the entire next week in a daze, trying to process what I'd seen. Jake continued to act strange and distant, but now I understood it had nothing to do with another woman or even with me. This was about something much bigger, much more complicated. The pieces started falling into place when I remembered something Sarah had mentioned weeks ago. She'd joked about how our agency had landed the Chen Industries account so quickly, how unusual it was for such a major company to choose a relatively small agency like ours. At the time, we'd all attributed it to Jake's impressive portfolio and innovative design concepts. But what if it wasn't about Jake's professional skills at all? Wednesday afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to confront Jake directly. I couldn't handle the uncertainty anymore, couldn't stand watching him suffer in silence while I suffered alongside him. Whatever was happening, whatever secret he was carrying, I wanted him to know that he didn't have to face it alone. I waited until most of the office had cleared out, then approached his desk. Jake looked up as I approached, and for a moment, his guard dropped. I saw exhaustion, fear, and something else, vulnerability. "Jake," I said softly, "we need to talk." He glanced around nervously, then nodded. "Not here," he whispered. "Can you meet me at Central Park, by the fountain, in an hour?" As I walked away to grab my things, my heart was pounding with anticipation and terror. In 1 hour, I was finally going to learn the truth. But nothing could have prepared me for what Jake was about to reveal. The hour before meeting Jake felt like the longest 60 minutes of my life. I kept rehearsing what I would say, how I would react to whatever truth he was about to share. But as I sat on the bench by the fountain, watching Jake approach with his shoulders hunched and his hands shoved deep in his pockets, I realized that no amount of preparation could have readied me for this conversation. "Emma," he said, settling beside me with a heavy sigh. I don't even know where to begin. The beginning might be good, I said gently, trying to keep my voice non-judgmental despite the chaos in my head. Jake was quiet for so long that I wondered if he'd changed his mind about telling me anything. Then, finally, he spoke. Marcus and we've been together for 8 months. Even though I'd suspected as much, hearing him say it out loud felt surreal. Together as in I'm in love with him, and he's in love with me. Jake's voice was barely above a whisper. Emma, I know how this looks. I know what people would say. Marcus is married, he's our client, he's everything that makes this impossible. I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief that Jake's distance hadn't been about rejecting me personally, and heartbreak that the man I'd been falling for was not only unavailable but trapped in what seemed like an impossibly complicated situation. How did it happen? I asked. Jake's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some calculated affair. We started working closely on the campaign, spending late nights refining concepts, and somewhere along the way, we just connected. On a level I've never experienced with anyone. But he's married, Jake. He has a family. Do you think I don't know that? Jake's voice cracked. Do you think I don't hate myself for it every single day? Marcus hasn't been happy in his marriage for years. They stay together for appearances, for their business partnerships, for their social status. But Emma, when he's with me, he becomes this completely different person. He's vulnerable and real and what about you? I interrupted. What about what you want? What about your happiness? That's when Jake completely broke down. That's the problem, Emma. I am happy with him. Happier than I've ever been in my life. But I'm also living in constant terror. If this gets out, Marcus loses everything: his company, his family, his reputation. And me? I'd lose my job, probably never work in this industry again. We're both living this double life, and it's destroying us. Is that why you've been so distant? So stressed? Jake nodded. Someone's been asking questions. Digging around. We think someone might know. But who was investigating them, and what did this person want? What kind of questions? I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. Jake ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd seen him do countless times when he was stressed about work deadlines, but now I understood it meant something much more serious. Marcus got a call last week from someone claiming to have photos of us together. They didn't ask for money, which almost makes it worse. They just said they wanted to have a conversation about our relationship. My blood went cold. Jake, that sounds like blackmail. Yeah, I know. His laugh was bitter and hollow. The thing is, we've been so careful. We never meet anywhere public, never communicate through work emails, never even look at each other differently in professional settings. So whoever has these photos, they've been watching us for a while. I thought about my own recent behavior, following Jake, timing his movements, enlisting Sarah in amateur detective work. Had someone else been doing the same thing, but with much more sinister intentions? Do you have any idea who it could be? That's what's driving me crazy. It could be anyone, a private investigator hired by Marcus's wife, someone from his board of directors who suspects something, even someone from our office who noticed the same things you probably noticed. The guilt hit me like a truck. Here I was, worried about Jake pulling away from me romantically, while he was dealing with someone potentially threatening to destroy his entire life. Jake, what are you going to do? We're meeting them tomorrow night. This person, whoever they are, wants to meet at some warehouse downtown. Marcus thinks we should just face it head on, find out what they want, and deal with the consequences. That sounds dangerous. Everything about this situation is dangerous, Emma. But Marcus is right, we can't keep living in fear. Whatever happens tomorrow night, at least we'll know where we stand. Jake stood up from the bench, and for a moment, I thought he was going to leave. Instead, he turned back to me with an expression I'll never forget, gratitude mixed with profound sadness. Emma, I need you to know something. All those times I seemed to be flirting with you, getting close to you, it wasn't fake. You're an incredible person, and in another life, in different circumstances, things might have been different between us. But not in this life. Not in this life. As Jake walked away, I sat by that fountain for another hour, processing everything I'd learned. The man I thought I was falling in love with was gay, in a secret relationship with a married client, and potentially being blackmailed by an unknown threat. Tomorrow night would determine not just Jake's future, but also force me to decide what role I wanted to play in this unfolding drama. I never could have imagined that my crush acting suspicious would lead to uncovering such a complex web of forbidden love, hidden identities, and dangerous secrets. Jake wasn't rejecting me because he didn't care, he was protecting a love that society told him was wrong, while trying to shield both himself and Marcus from a threat that could destroy everything they'd built. That night changed my entire perspective on love, sacrifice, and the courage it takes to be authentic in a world that doesn't always accept who you really are. Jake and Marcus were fighting for something real in impossible circumstances, and their story taught me that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that happen in secret, in stolen moments, against all odds. The next day would bring revelations that none of us saw coming, but that's a story for another time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for the next one. What would you have done in my situation?